Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
After graduating with my business degree during the 2008 recession, I had to take whatever job I could find. The building management company wasn't exactly my dream workplace, but it paid the bills and offered health insurance, something I desperately needed for my mom's medical expenses. The job itself wasn't bad. I managed parking spot rentals for the building, which meant dealing with thousands of paper folders that needed manual updating. Payments, bounced checks, new contracts, everything had to be meticulously documented. I was good at staying organized and actually enjoyed the systematic nature of the work. My boss, though, he was from Eastern New Jersey and was the most entitled person I'd ever met. A narcissist through and through. On his good days, he was just a jerk. On his bad days, well, let's just say we all tried to avoid him. I've been there for almost 2 years when I finally reached my breaking point. I'd just returned from my lunch break where I'd interviewed with another company. They made me an offer, but I told them I needed time to think about it. Deep down, I was afraid of change, even though I was miserable in my current position. That afternoon, I was carrying about 2 feet worth of files to the back room when I heard that irritating sound. My boss tapping his coffee cup on his desk. He called out demanding coffee. I responded back that I'd be right with him after putting these files away. He tapped his cup again, louder this time, and demanded coffee again, his voice rising. I walked back to his office, struggling under the weight of all those folders, thinking maybe he hadn't heard me. I explained again that I'd be right with him after putting down the files. I only managed to take one step out of his office when he completely lost it. He slammed his hand on his desk 3 times, screaming for coffee like he was disciplining a disobedient dog. Something in me snapped. 2 years of being treated like a servant, of having my education and capabilities reduced to fetching coffee and enduring his tantrums. It all came to a head in that moment. I turned back into his office, pulled my arms out from under the stack of files, and let all 300 folders drop to the floor. Papers went flying everywhere, scattering across his office like confetti. In the sweetest voice I could muster, I told him his coffee was coming right up, stepping over the mess like it wasn't even there. I went to the break room, filled his cup with coffee, and added enough sugar to make it practically solid. Then I walked back to his office and, accidentally, slammed the cup down so hard that the syrupy mess splashed everywhere, all over his fancy appointment calendar, his pristine white shirt, his blue silk tie, and that pretentious leather chair he was so proud of. He sputtered in rage, choking out threats about having my job for this. I simply told him there was no need. I quit. While he was still trying to wipe the coffee off his shirt, I walked back to my desk, called the company I'd interviewed with during lunch, and accepted their offer. I grabbed my purse, walked out, and never looked back. A few months later, I ran into my old coworker at a coffee shop downtown. She told me he'd gone through 4 assistants in the 3 months since I left. Apparently, the last one quit after he threw another coffee tantrum, but this time she'd recorded the whole thing on her phone and sent it to the corporate office. They finally launched an investigation into his behavior, and he was forced to attend mandatory management training and anger management classes. I heard he has to get his own coffee now. The building management company installed one of those fancy coffee machines in every department, but they specifically didn't put one near his office. I've been with my new company for 5 years now, and I actually got promoted to department manager last year. And yes, I always get my own coffee and offered to grab some for my team while I'm at it. I'm 14 and my dad's a music producer. He works with some pretty big names in the industry, which means we travel a lot for his work. Usually, I love it, getting to see different cities, meeting interesting people, and experiencing new things. This time, we were in New York for a week-long recording session with an upcoming artist. We were staying at this fancy hotel in Manhattan. Not the kind of place we usually stay at, but the record label was covering the expenses, so why not? The lobby was always bustling with people in expensive suits and clothes. I felt a bit out of place in my hoodie and jeans, but my dad always taught me that clothes don't define a person. That morning, my dad had left early for the studio and I was heading down to the hotel restaurant to grab some breakfast. I was wearing my favorite hoodie, the one my mom got me before she passed away last year. It's this deep blue color with some subtle galaxy patterns on it. I always wear it when I'm feeling a bit nervous in new places. I was waiting for the elevator when this woman, let's call her Karen, started staring at me. You know that look some people give you when they think you don't belong somewhere? Yeah, that one. I tried to ignore it, but then she started walking towards me. She yelled at me to stop right there. When I asked her what she wanted, she immediately accused me of stealing her phone. I told her I had no idea what she was talking about, but she wouldn't listen. She insisted that she had seen me following her around the lobby earlier and claimed I must have taken it when she wasn't looking. I hadn't even been in the lobby earlier. I'd just woken up and come straight down for breakfast. But there she was, getting in my face, pointing her finger at me. I tried explaining again that I had just arrived, but she wouldn't hear it. Instead, she started demanding that I empty my pockets right then and there. She was causing such a scene that the hotel security came over. This tall security guard approached us, trying to figure out what was happening. He asked what the problem was, and Karen immediately started ranting about how I had stolen her phone and demanded that I be searched. I tried explaining to the guard that I hadn't taken anything and had just come down from my room. The security guard looked between us and asked Karen if she had any proof of her accusation. That's when she really lost it, saying that just looking at me was proof enough, claiming I obviously wasn't a guest there and must have snuck in to steal from people. That's when it got worse. She actually lunged at me, trying to grab my hoodie pockets. I stepped back, but she managed to grab my arm. I was scared and angry at the same time. Here was this grown woman assaulting me in a hotel lobby, and all because she couldn't keep track of her own phone. My dad always taught me to stay calm in tough situations, but it was getting harder by the second. Then, like some kind of divine intervention, my dad walked in. He had forgotten some equipment and came back to get it. He saw what was happening and rushed over, shouting at Karen to get her hands off me and demanding to know what she thought she was doing. Karen refused to believe he was my dad and kept insisting I had stolen her phone. My dad, furious now, told her that I was a guest in the hotel and that she was assaulting a minor. He turned to security and said he wanted to press charges. The hotel manager had arrived by this point, and things got interesting. They checked the security cameras, which showed I had indeed just come down from our floor. While they were reviewing the footage, Karen's phone started ringing in her Uber driver's car. Apparently, she'd left it there earlier that morning, but it didn't end there. The police arrived because the hotel had called them when she grabbed me. They took statements from everyone, including other guests who had witnessed the whole thing. The police officer told Karen that she was under arrest for assault of a minor and attempted robbery. She tried to claim that she was the real victim and accused me of somehow planting her phone in the Uber. The officer simply read her rights and suggested she use her right to remain silent. They took her away in handcuffs, still trying to blame me somehow. The hotel manager was mortified and upgraded us to a suite for the rest of our stay. They even sent up a huge plate of cookies and a letter of apology. Later that evening, my dad and I were sitting in our new suite, eating those apology cookies. He praised me for handling the situation well, and when I admitted I had been scared but remembered his advice about staying calm, he shared some wisdom about how people will judge you for all the wrong reasons. But what matters is how you carry yourself. We found out later that Karen was charged with assault, attempted robbery, and filing a false police report. She tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, but the security footage and witness statements proved otherwise. She was banned from the entire hotel chain worldwide. The incident made the local news and several civil rights organizations reached out to us. They wanted to use the case to highlight the ongoing issue of racial profiling in public spaces. My dad let me decide whether we wanted to pursue it further, and I said yes. If my story could help prevent this from happening to someone else, then something good could come from this awful experience. Karen was sentenced to community service and had to attend mandatory sensitivity training. She also had to pay a fine and write a formal apology letter to me. The letter arrived a month later, but it was full of excuses and "I'm sorry if you felt threatened" kind of statements. My dad and I just laughed and recycled it. I still travel with my dad for his work, and I still wear my favorite hoodie. But now I walk with my head held even higher, knowing that I stood up to ignorance and didn't let it change who I am. I never had the easiest childhood. My biological father remarried when I was 7, and my stepmother turned out to be nothing like the sweet, caring woman she pretended to be during their courtship. The moment the wedding ring slipped onto her finger, her true colors emerged. Living with her was like walking on eggshells. Every little thing I did seemed to set her off. The way I cleaned my room, how I did my homework, even how I breathed apparently wasn't up to her standards. My father, always trying to keep the peace, would side with her to avoid confrontation. He would always defend her, saying she was just trying to help me become a better person. But we all knew that wasn't true. I learned to stay quiet, to become almost invisible in my own home. I developed a passion for reading because books became my escape. In those pages, I could be anywhere but there. I could read incredibly fast, something I later learned was linked to my autism, and would devour entire novels in a single sitting. One thing my stepmother and I had in common was our love for Harry Potter. She'd often brag to her friends about how she was such a devoted fan, even though she'd only started reading the series after meeting my father. I've been reading them since the first book came out. When the Half-Blood Prince was about to be released, she made a big show of pre-ordering her copy and planning a whole weekend to read it undisturbed. I quietly saved up my allowance and bought my own copy the morning it was released. I started reading at 9 a.m. By 3 p.m. I had finished the entire book. That's when I had my moment of clarity. Years of pent-up frustration and anger suddenly had an outlet. I picked up the phone and called home. When my stepmother answered, I asked if she was there, though I could already tell it was her. She responded irritably that she was reading and demanded to know what I wanted. That's when I took my chance and shouted out that Dumbledore dies in the book. I hung up immediately. 5 minutes later, I called again. This time, my father answered, telling me that my stepmother was crying. I pretended to feel terrible and asked to speak with her so I could apologize. When she got on the phone, her voice shaking with anger, she barely got a word out before I screamed that Snape was the one who killed Dumbledore. I slammed the phone down and burst into hysterical laughter. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years, I felt powerful. I had finally found a way to hurt her like she had hurt me, using something she actually cared about. The fallout was exactly what you'd expect. My father left a voicemail raging about how I'd ruined her entire weekend, how she'd been looking forward to this for months, and calling me a spiteful, ungrateful child. I listened to his message with a smile on my face. That was the last time I ever spoke to either of them. I blocked their numbers, moved out as soon as I could, and never looked back. Sometimes my relatives try to guilt me into reconnecting, telling me that she's changed or that she was just trying her best. But I know better. That single act of rebellion, that one perfect moment of revenge, was worth more than any fake reconciliation. Now, years later, happily married and living my best life, I still smile when I remember how I ruined the one thing she had been looking forward to all summer. She never got to enjoy another Harry Potter book without knowing I might spoil it for her. I heard that she didn't even buy the last book because she was so paranoid about me somehow spoiling it. I've been working in the hospitality industry for about 7 years now, working my way up from a simple housekeeper to becoming the front desk supervisor at this small hotel. It's not a fancy place by any means, just 77 rooms, and we operate with one staff member per shift. But I love it here. The owner treats us well, and most of our guests are pretty reasonable. That all changed last night when she checked in. I was working the evening shift when this lady in her 60s hobbled in with a walker and a broken leg. Being the caring person I am, and because it's part of our basic customer service, I immediately offered to help her with her bags and show her to her room. She thanked me sweetly, calling me dear, and telling me how kind I was. I should have seen the warning signs when she took forever to get to her room. The whole way there, she complained about everything. How the hallway was too long, why we didn't have more elevators, and even how the carpet pattern was making her dizzy. But I kept my professional smile on and got her settled. That's when the calls started. First call about 30 minutes after check-in. She asked if someone could bring ice for her leg. I agreed to do it just this once and explained that we had ice machines on each floor. She immediately protested, insisting she couldn't possibly walk there with her condition. I brought her the ice. An hour later, she called again, this time asking if someone could come get her laundry to wash it. I explained apologetically that we weren't a full-service hotel and told her about our coin-operated laundry facility on the first floor. She wouldn't hear it, insisting that she couldn't possibly do her own laundry in her condition and demanding we send someone up. Before I could stop her, she had already convinced one of our housekeepers to help. When I found out, I immediately pulled the housekeeper aside. I thanked them for wanting to help and told them to keep the coin as a tip, explaining that I'd have our laundry department handle her clothes this one time, but we couldn't make this a regular service. The housekeeper admitted that the woman had been very insistent, and they had felt bad for her. I told them I understood but explained we couldn't set this precedent. The next morning she called again, asking if someone could come make coffee in her room because the coffee maker was too complicated. My colleague who was working the morning shift called me about this, and I knew we had to put a stop to it. I instructed them to tell her we couldn't leave the front desk unattended and to suggest that she might want to call someone to stay with her if she needed regular assistance. But she wasn't having it. She demanded to speak to the manager, which happened to be me. She ranted about how unacceptable this was, claiming that as a paying customer, other hotels would bend over backward to help their guests. I explained our situation, clarifying that we were a limited service hotel with only one staff member per shift who had to remain at the front desk. I offered to recommend some full-service hotels or provide information about local personal care services. That's when she accused us of discrimination, threatening to sue us for kicking her out because of her disability. I assured her this wasn't the case, explaining that we happily accommodate guests with disabilities and provide all our standard services equally, but what she was requesting went beyond our capabilities. I explained that we simply didn't have the staff to provide personal care services to any guests, regardless of their situation. She protested that she had already paid for a week and accused us of leaving her helpless. I offered her two options. Either I could help her find a more suitable hotel and refund her remaining nights, or provide her with a list of local personal care services and medical assistance companies that could help during her stay. She stared at me for a long moment, probably realizing she couldn't bully her way through this one. Finally, she demanded the refund, threatening to make sure everyone knew how terrible our place was. I simply offered to process her refund right away and asked if she needed help calling a taxi to take her to another hotel. Within an hour, she was gone, but not before leaving a string of nasty reviews online. Fortunately, our owner was completely supportive of how I handled the situation. We even updated our booking website to make it crystal clear that we're a limited service hotel with one staff member per shift to avoid similar situations in the future. Those negative reviews actually helped us. Other hotels in the area saw them and started referring guests to us when they wanted a more independent, budget-friendly option. Turns out being clear about what you don't offer is just as important as advertising what you do. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.